Big Booby Workshop, is that what it's called now?
There you go, it's already started. So. Well, my name's Anne from Nomorepage3. Like I say, thank you very much for coming. We're basically wanting to open a conversation today, so really do join in at any point with any of the conversations. It's a big two-way thing. I know a lot of you will know already about the Nomorepage3 campaign, but just to give you a really brief intro into it, if you're not sort of familiar with it. It's basically a petition asking David Dinsmore to editor of The Sun to stop printing nude pictures of ladies on page 3. It was started during the summer of 2012 when a writer called Luciana Holmes basically was flicking through The Sun. Jessica Ennis had just won a gold medal, and yet still the biggest image of a woman in the paper was of the topless girl, basically. And she thought that's not a very positive representation of women, so she started a petition. It's had over 195,000 signatures, 156 MPs have signed. We've got support from really great big organisations like Women's Aid, End Violence Against Women, Girl Guiding, Mum's Net, Cancer Awareness, all lots of positive support. Basically, The Sun is one of the biggest selling newspapers in the country, and the biggest, most prominent image of a woman in that paper is one bare-breasted, wearing only her knickers. It delivers a message in no uncertain terms what women are there for and how women are to be seen. While men in the papers make things happen, you know, they run the country, they manage football teams, blah, 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 women stand there with their boots out. That's something that's, as you look around the gallery here, is kind of quite clearly reiterated as well, which is something Camilla will go into more detail on. The way women are represented in media, in art, in history, affects the way they're viewed in society and the way they're treated and the lives that they lead. Joan Vasconcelos has gone to great lengths to emphasise what women do, not just how they look, but what women do. Her exhibition highlights the absurd notion that while men make art, women women make craft, you know, which is why her work is so heavily focused on women's crafts. But she uses these crafts to oppose and disrupt by installing these crafts in a mass scale into traditionally masculine spaces such as this gallery. She's using them to modify, to subvert the patriarchal norms in place, which is something that Nomorepage3 very much want to do. Because the representation of women and men matter, in a country where we want equality and fairness, there's discussions like this, exhibitions like this, that can all help to make this happen. So thank you again for coming. We're going to basically be speaking here, giving you a bit of a background into representation of women. And then we're going to break off. We'll go over, half of you can go over with Becca and Camilla to Bonga, and the other half can stay here with me and Jane discussing the Big Booby. Then we'll swap, and then we'll all come together and sort of share our findings, have a discussion. We've got poetry performance as well by Andy, and you can all sort of contribute towards writing a poem for the day. So, I'll start with how does page 3 represent women? Well, in 1969, Rupert Murdoch relaunched The Sun, which was a flagging newspaper at the time. He relaunched it as a tabloid, and he began putting glamour models on page 3. They weren't topless at first, but it didn't take too long before they were. When David Dinsmore replaced Dominic Mohan as editor in 2013, he was asked whether he'd keep printing pictures of women, and he said quite frankly that the page 3 girl is staying because topless women are a good way to sell papers. So, what does page 3 say women are? Well, in that respect, it says they're a commodity, particularly when they're naked. They're an object to be looked at, commented on, bought and sold. An object that, when topless, helps to sell newspapers. So, as I said before, it's the biggest picture of a woman in the paper, next to news articles of men doing things. Page 3 woman isn't doing anything, she's just basically there to titillate. During the Leveson inquiry, Dominic Mohan, who was editor at the time, said in defence of page 3 that it's meant to represent youth and freshness and to celebrate natural beauty. So it is aware of how it's representing and who it's representing. But if we just have a quick look at that youth and freshness and natural beauty, it basically, the average age is 22 and a half, white, size 8, with a breast size of 32 double D to double F. So that average beauty represents less than 5% of the female population, and that average beauty that natural beauty doesn't say a word. So that's a really nice celebration of women, isn't it? Aside from that, the question has to be asked, why? Why does the sun need to represent youth and freshness with naked boobs? Why does women's beauty need celebrating with naked boobs? And women do so many great things, why can we not be celebrating the things they do without the naked boobs? Just this week, somebody signed a petition, and their reason for signing was because there's more important things than breasts. Page 3 objectifies and degrades. So, page 3 turns women into objects. Objects with naked boobs, objects to titillate, objects to comment on, tweet about, objects that don't talk back. And this does drip into society. So, page 3 doesn't represent women, it represents naked boobs, and only as a commodity. And we, for one, think that women are a lot more than that.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the historical aspects, because page 3 it doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's a historical kind of line of representation. And that really starts here. I'm sure as you came in through the gallery today, and hopefully when you leave you will notice that most of the women are half-dressed or nude, and there's some good examples here. And in fact that's something that's angered a lot of, engaged a lot of art historians, and in art history it's really something that has only recently started to be debated and picked up on. But as you see, the museum sometimes can lag a little bit behind because these images are popular, so we get that same problem. What people want and what is good for society isn't necessarily, sometimes they don't match up. So this museum also has a strong collection of pre-Raphaelite art. Maybe some of you came today to have a look at it because it's quite a famous collection. And the pre-Raphaelites are also problematic in this sense, as they often used women half naked and kind of subjecting them to be pin-up girls in a sense, although in a historicised way. So we'll look at that later when we go into the pre-Raphaelite room. In art history, again, in the criticism of art and in the museum world, the word stunners and pre-Raphaelites are often connected. So there have been several books, for example, written about women in the pre-Raphaelite movement, so actual living women, and women in the artworks, using the word stunner. And again, that's something we find in page 3, stunner, right? Woman is not mind, woman is body. So these things do hang together, and it's something that angered people way before our modern day campaign. And in fact, in 1913, on the 3rd of April, a group of suffragettes took their way into this very room, actually, this whole gallery, and they smashed 13 paintings after Emmeline Pankhurst had kind of given a call to arms that women had to go out and make action. So they did it that way, and it was to destroy public property, but it was also, they attacked a lot of pre-Raphaelite imagery of naked women. They did that all over the country. The most famous example is the Rokeby Venus at the National Gallery in London, but we'll look at later some of the images they destroyed here and think about why they picked the ones that were of women, often naked, often nude. And then finally, some of you might have heard of the Guerrilla Girls of the 1980s and 90s who really flagged this up. They were a group of feminist artists and scholars who made posters. So I've got some of them with me today, and we can hand some of them out to you so you have a little bit of a takeaway. And basically they they put into context the problem that most women in art galleries are nude, but most artists in art galleries are male. So this is the problem, they thought. And then when Anna Louise is handing you out some of these posters, they're different and they contain a lot of statistics, but they were made as artworks, as posters. You might think to yourself, but this is 30 years ago. Or you might think about the suffragettes and you might think, but this is, we've got the vote now, things must be better. But actually, in the world of art, things aren't much better than the 1913 or the 80s or the 90s. And that's why this work is quite powerful, because it keeps reminding us that this change is slow, if non-existent. So we'll talk more about that historical aspect when we switch to groups, yeah?
Okay.
I'll just kind of stand over here and look at the room and the sirens together. So when we were thinking about ending this event today, we came up with the title Time Machine, which is actually the name of the exhibition that we're in today, of Joanna Vasconcelos's work, / Back in Time. And I've got this quote from her, which I'll read now. So the title Time Machine is perfect. I'm not doing anything new. I'm just continuing work that started many centuries ago. We evolved because of the other's existence, so seeing us together makes sense. What is new is that we're opening the doors to discussion, we are bringing life to the collection and a new dynamic. So that's what her principle was, and you can see like the interrelation of her works throughout the gallery with the works that are already in the gallery. And we thought that was really perfect to sum up what we're trying to do today with this event, which is interact with these ideas of traditional womanhood and maybe come up with our own new interpretations of them. So that was one of things. Okay, I thought I'd begin by mentioning that actually she doesn't define herself as a feminist artist, although you often hear her referenced as a feminist Portuguese artist. She says she doesn't want to limit her work to only one discourse. However, because she uses a lot of materials that come from women's lives, and she also supports them in more tangible ways. So some of the money that she's raising through the products downstairs is going to a domestic abuse charity. So she is very supportive of women, and you often hear of her as a feminist artist. Okay. Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about The Bride, even though that piece isn't in the gallery today. So she became quite well known for this piece, The Bride, which is a 5-metre tall chandelier made of 25,000 tampons, if you can imagine that. And it really demonstrates sort of the humorous nature of the work. Sorry, I got it. Yeah. So it's called The Bride, which is kind of funny because it's a chandelier made of tampons. And I think it makes us reflect on the bride as like this virginal woman who's kind of packaged and consumed on her wedding night by the man, but then it's made of tampons. So it's like there's also this kind of messiness to it. And I also like to think that if we were to throw water over the bride, or if it was to get rained on, which we hope doesn't happen, because that would ruin artwork, but if that was to happen, then it would expand to like twice its size. And I think that's quite interesting in thinking of like the potential of women's voices and our interpretation of what womanhood is, the potential for it to expand to not be kind of these narrow definitions that we've been educated to kind of accept. Yeah, so I won't talk too much about Big Booby and Bongo, because we're really interacting with them. But I wanted to touch on Big Booby as a response to the sirens. So when the sirens, this piece here, was first shown to the public, fast young men called it disgusting, and young women were so offended by it, they could not look at it. They wouldn't even look at it. So I don't know how they used to be offended by it, but apparently they didn't even look at it. And I think that's interesting. It demonstrates how women were kind of educated to view the female body with disgust, and yeah, something not to be looked at. They wouldn't even know how their own bodies really functioned. They weren't given that education. And nowadays we're educated to look at like our soft porn equivalent of this, page 3, and we're educated to look at it and be like, that's amazing, she's got beautiful boobs, I wish I had boobs like hers. And actually it's just part of the same kind of narrative, but now it's been swung around to the other side, and we're meant to see that as empowerment, whereas actually it's not empowerment. And I feel like with this piece, the Big Booby piece, Joanna Vasconcelos is inviting us to kind of challenge that and resist these kind of dominant narratives and sort of say there are other ways to view females and womanhood. So yeah, it's bouncing off the wall, it's kind of reclaiming actual space, so it's actually coming out and intruding into our space.